You have seen this graph. This is a regular life cycle of almost every game. Hypermarketing gives you initial spike in the player numbers at the very beginning of game's release. Then you see the gradual drop, and after you see some type of peaks from time to time when game is available for free, in some kind of bundle, or just available on a discount. That's what happens with almost every game. But there are very few and very notable exceptions. And in the previous video we talked about one of the games like that, Hearts of Iron 4. But there is another very similar game that has been doing that but for far longer. And this is how this game's graph looks like now. The game was initially released in 2013, more than 10 years ago now. And its initial spike in players number is absolutely not impressive anymore because it has been beating it over and over and over again. And now more than 10 years later, average player number is exceeding the maximum player number on release, which is incredibly rare. And this game is still keeps on going more than 10 years after its release. And in this video we're going to be breaking down why does this happen, and maybe even find out how others can actually replicate it. And yeah, this game is none other than Europa Universalis 4. There is almost no one in the strategy game genre community that have not heard about this game, but for everyone else this game might be quite a bit of mystery, despite its quite old age. Why though? Well, because it is grand strategy that is quite niche for most regular players. But in a few words, let's describe what is it, and then we're gonna discuss why it keeps on going. First things first, Europa Universalis 4 is a historical grand strategy game that takes part during around Renaissance period, right after end of the Middle Ages. It gives you entire world to control, and you can control any nation in the world in any time during these time periods. And this segues to the first reason why this game is succeeding, and it is its historical setting. You see, this game is not happening way too far in the past, and many of the modern nations are still existing there. And if they're not, at least their ancestors are there, giving everyone ability to play with either their nation or their ancestors' nations. And this way actually see what part in history their nations were actually taking part. You will understand why it was so difficult for small nations to succeed, because they were small, and why some nations were succeeding so much because of their resources, their strategic locations, and etc, etc. This historical setting gives you the feeling of relatability, which is incredibly important for any game. And when you are relating to the game, you just keep returning to it over and over and over again. And this segues to the second reason, and it is replayability. You see, relatability can keep you going for so long. Eventually you need to see some different perspectives other than your nations. And because game gives you several centuries to play with an entire world, you will just find a lot of reasons to replay the game from a different perspective over and over and over and over again. Game just keeps on giving because all the different nations are playing completely differently because of all the different variables for every single nation. But playing with every single nation is not easy, and even mastering a single nation is not easy. And that's where the third reason rises up, and its complexity. You see, with this game is a very similar reason as with Hearts of Iron 4, but here this game might be a little bit easier to get into but far harder to master. For that reason, this game welcomes more players quicker but also keeps people gripped for far longer. Game is just much more difficult to master than Hearts of Iron 4, but it's also much easier to get into. The learning curve is not that steep, but it's far longer. It will take far more time for you to get to the mastery plateau than with any other game. That's why people keep returning to the game over and over and over again. And when you actually get closer to the master game, you'll also realize all the different ways of playing game, unlike you can do with Hearts of Iron 4. You see, with Hearts of Iron 4, the war is kinda necessary. You cannot avoid it. World War II would almost certainly happen in that game, and you cannot do anything to avoid it. You can just do your best to prepare for it. In this game, well, you can actually play with many nations without any wars at all. Granted, it will be very difficult to do so, but you can actually do it. You can become an economic superpower or technological giant and just make other people fight for you, or just to settle all the differences with diplomacy. This game actually allows you to do that, and this variety of different types of gameplay keeps you going for even longer. And even without mentioning anything else, you are into hundreds or even thousands of hours territory right now. But even that is not it. Game is also getting a continued support with more than 30 DLCs available, and that might be a turn off for many who are just starting to play, but in reality it's not actually that bad. You see, you don't need all the DLCs to play the game, and no one is actually forcing you to buy all the DLCs all at once. And even if you want to play with all the DLCs all at once right now, you don't even need to pay pay that much money because you can actually subscribe for the DLCs as well. EU4 actually has a DLC subscription service just like Hearts of Iron 4 does. So you can enjoy entire game with all its updates and additions for as cheap as possible. But now we're getting to the crown jewel of the Paradox games, and it is a mod support. You see, no matter how much you play EU4, you will eventually run out of things to do, especially if you're gonna play it for 10 years like many people are doing. And that's where mod support actually shows itself, because EU4 has probably one of the best mod supports of all the games. Starting from the most simplistic one, like extended timeline that allows you to play for 10,000 year history, not just a few hundred. You can start with year 2 AD and keep on going until year 9999. This way you can have almost infinite gameplay, starting with the most basic of a gameplay and going to, well, modern day or even futuristic settings. This game even allows you to play with different fantasy worlds, like one of my favorite mods, Elder Scrolls Universalis, that allows you to play in an Elder Scrolls universe. And by the way, this is one of the most complete mods that I have ever seen in any game. Or you can just go and play in a world of Game of Thrones and just see how differently you could control this world. Or you just go into basics like Lord of the Rings world or even World of Warcraft worlds. And I didn't even talk about different gameplay changes and additions you can have with those mods. The possibilities are almost limitless, and you can just hit 10,000 hour mark with ease with all these mods. And with all this combined, game just keeps on giving and just refuses to die. And even with DLCs added to this day, game just keeps on living, and just game does not show any signs of being stopped. Yes, growth is not as rapid anymore, but having 15 to 30,000 players concurrently online all the time will says something about the game's success, especially after 10 years. So if you haven't tried Europa Universalis 4, give it a chance. You might actually find your new obsession, and you might hate me for it, but you're gonna love every single second of it regardless. And if you want to watch full review of the game, I have it available right here, so you can watch it right there without wasting time on watching all the other reviews. I'm gonna see you there. Take care.